Welcome to the Big Screen Symposium 2017 podcast. The Big Screen Symposium took place in Auckland on the 30th of September and 1st of October. Please note, while many of the speakers used clips in their sessions, we've edited these out to better suit the podcast. Independent filmmaker So Yong Kim discusses how she works with experienced and inexperienced actors to bring her characters to life and keep the chaos alive on set.
Welcome, So Yong.
Thank you. Thank you.
So we're going to kind of pick up from where So left off in her keynote yesterday. She's managed to make 4 feature films over not a particularly long period of time, I think, which was In Between Days, which we saw in the keynote yesterday for those of you who were there, and then TREELESS MOUNTAIN, and then For ELLEN, and then lastly LOVESONG, and then since then she's moved into television, which I think Esther said yesterday. So we're going to touch on television, and we're going to move through her films and just meander talking about process a bit, but picking up after In Between Days, which I think you beautifully managed to reveal to us how you were kind of finding your way through with that film. In fact, you said a line yesterday which was, I didn't know what I was supposed to capture, which I think is really liberating for people to hear. And also that you were mining and discovering emotional moments. So my question to start off with is, in the space between In Between Days and TREELESS MOUNTAIN, what had you learnt and what was propelling your kind of curiosity, and what were you sort of chasing as you were developing and then moving into TREELESS MOUNTAIN?
Yeah, I think for me, making In Between Days really gave me the confidence to move on to make TREELESS MOUNTAIN. And I think yesterday in my short, smaller group session, I talked about how the genesis of TREELESS MOUNTAIN existed even before In Between Days. I wrote a short story about 2 young children who catch grasshopper and they grill it and eat it, and they make some money on the side. So I wrote that in my creative writing class I was taking in New York. And then In Between Days, in a way, because I edited the film afterwards, we shot tons of footage on this video camera, about 40 to 50 hours, I can't remember. But I kind of had to learn how to put a story together from this footage I got. Of course, we had these wonderful material, but it's like it was so much stuff in between, hours and hours and stuff to go through. So I think in the process of editing that film really helped me learn about how to structure a narrative. So after that experience, I think it gave me more confidence to write TREELESS as a feature film and take next steps.
And what was it about, like if you can distill it, rather than a whole, feeling like you've got to be super wise here or anything, what was it about, what was the thing that you really took away from having to structure a narrative that you took into TREELESS? Because TREELESS is it's less impressionistic in a way.
I think after In Between Days, which was originally something that I thought it could be an experimental film, or it could be completely an experiential or impressionistic film. So after that, I really wanted to do something that was much more structured and go into the other extreme of building a narrative or telling a very narrative in a traditional sense story. So it was just a challenge for me as a filmmaker going into the next process for me, because I wanted to see what I might have missed from not going to film school per se. So I would have to say TREELESS was that kind of trying my best at, attempt at telling a traditional narrative story.
It's so fascinating though, sorry, because the story is really beautifully structured, but you can't help but avoid chaos, because she's telling the story about 2 really young girls. So you've got, how old are the actors that you were at the centre of your film?
They're 4 and 6.
Yeah, right. So a really structured film about a 4 and a 6-year-old. And presumably then some professional actors working around them.
Yes.
So we have a clip which actually touches on this exact thing. Do you want to introduce that, or should we play it and then reflect on it?
I think they could just watch it.
Okay, all right. So let's play this clip from Treeless Mountain. So the film is full of beautiful performances from the young girls, and it's a story about two girls who've been basically abandoned by their mother. Right? So this is a good example of, like, how does that happen? I think that's a useful question for people.
Yeah. So when we cast the two young actors. Older one, Heejun, is 6, and her mom came on set with her. And then younger one, Sung-hee, was 4, and she was in foster care. So her minder from foster care came to work with us. So we had adults around them, and basically we had a schedule of what scenes we were going to shoot. But we realized quickly that all that scheduling will have to go out the window, because some mornings the kids were not able to be in specific scene that we're supposed to shoot. So we kind of took this approach of we'll mix all these scenes and see what mood they're in when they show up, and then we'll make it into a game. So then if they feel like they're in a grumpy mood, then maybe they could, throw rocks at each other, or they'll get in a fight and they'll get that out. Or, okay, today they're gonna fill piggy banks and count the change. So, so it had to be a game that I could set up for them. And that seemed to work. And it helped that, the film took place in 3 different locations. So we were moving, so they weren't getting bored.
Can I just ask you to be, it might seem like a really stupid question, but, okay, so they arrive and they're grumpy, and you're like, let's throw rocks. Are you going, because I can use that as an equivalent for this point in the script?
Yep.
You're being quite specific, or are you going, I'll just get it anyway because I might use it? How are you stacking it up against the document you've got?
I'm going along with, activities that they could do. Like, there's a rock throwing scene actually that got cut out of the film. So that's one of them. But, or they'll go and catch grasshoppers, or they'll go
so something that was in the script.
Yes, and then they'll go grill the grasshoppers and they'll get grossed out. You know, so it's like depending on their mood, we will switch scenes around that we need to shoot for that day. Or if they're really in bad mood, then we'll get some sweets and they'll eat that, and things like that. And if they're behaving badly, we'll make them clean the floor. I think that's part of the scene too. Anyway, so it would be just a bunch of stuff that's task-based, and then when we're shooting, then I'll feed them some dialogue from the side. So, because with the, there's a framing for the film, and right on the edge, I'm sitting there and I tell them, okay, say, I'm hungry. Okay, I'm hungry. So that's basically how I worked with them. So for this scene, which was quite challenging, what I had to do was I had to use Hyun's mom to get to that emotional state. So I asked her mom if there's something that Hyun will get upset about, something she would get emotionally easily upset. And then she said she was missing her dad at the moment, so I asked her to kind of use that for me in the scene. So her mom pulled her aside before the scene started on her coverage to tell her something about her dad, news from home about her dad, and then we shot the scene. So.
And it worked. Yeah. And it's a very beautiful film. I highly recommend that people seek it out. But So I'm going to run us almost straight into our next clip because it's not unrelated, but it extends into different things, which is your next film for Ellen. So, and we may go back to Treeless, but I'm wondering if you could just introduce the project of For Ellen and what the genesis of that project was, because you had an actor in there who was also a producer, and just what your curiosity was that took you into that project, which also had a child in it.
Yeah. I don't know. I guess I love working with children. So my next film For Ellen was really about, well, it was about something else that became For Ellen. But initially when I was writing the script, I got stuck around page 30 because the main character was, I think, unsettling for me. And originally it was going to be an Asian father who was like in his 60s. And then I couldn't cope with that. And then he became a ghost who was haunting his wife and daughters. And then, but each iteration of the writing, I would get stuck around 30, and then it was just not working. And I kept writing, going back to page 1 and rewriting. And then it became, I mean, it was quite interesting conceptually, but very demanding and kind of disheartening. But I think I did that for, I don't know, a while, maybe 5-6 months, I can't remember exactly, until one day, I don't know why, but a friend of mine's name kind of popped up that who was this really, he worked for the Peace Corps for 4 years. He was in a seminary school to become a priest. He was this kind of iconic angel of a person, you know, deeply compassionate about humanity. And then I thought, oh, it should be his name, which was Joby Taylor. And then, ironically, I thought Joby Taylor would be a rock and roll name. He's not a preacher, you know, per se. So it just kind of clicked. I'm like, oh, this guy should be a rock and roller. And he abandoned his baby when she was, you know, young, and then now he's gonna go and meet his daughter for the first time. So it just clicked all together because of that name. And then it was about a month or 2 after that happened, the story shaped. So originally, I sent the script to Paul, thinking that he might want to take Paul Dano.
Dano, yeah.
Paul Dano, and I thought he might want to take the lawyer character role because it's a younger guy. And then the Joby Taylor, the rock and roller, was going to be in mid to late 30s, so older person who's kind of washed up and missed his chance to become this big rock star, essentially. But after he read the script, he called me back and he said, hey, what if I was the rock and roller? You know, I said, that's interesting because then he will become a younger dad, you know, and then in a sense, it will give more potential for him to change, you know. So we kind of worked on that, and I asked him if, yeah. So we kind of reshaped the character, and he became a producer, and then we were able to make the film. So, yeah.
Because he was involved.
Yes.
But he was involved in the development of the character.
In a way, yes, of the younger character of Joby Taylor.
It's interesting that the genesis of that character after that long period of time of coming to it was a kind of opposite, that you found a quite inspiring white light-like person that you knew and then flipped it and turned it into a rock and roller who was washed up, isn't it? I mean, that's just got some tension in it. That's interesting, even creatively. Okay, well, we're going to watch a clip from this film because, and I think we will set this clip up a little bit because I think it's interesting for people to know. Can you just, it happens kind of mid to 2/3 of the way through the story, is that right?
Yeah, 2/3 way into the story. And he goes up to the small town in northern New York State to sign the divorce papers. His wife is remarrying. She wants him to sign the divorce papers and also give her the custody of their daughter because he has not seen her since she was born. So he drives up there thinking that, yeah, of course, you know, I'm a rock and roller. I'm not good. That's fine. So he basically goes up there to sign the papers, and then on the condition that he gets to spend one day with her. You know, so anyway.
So this is as part of their one day. That's clip 2. Thank you. Do you want to talk a little bit about the process around that?
So we shot the movie on film on 35, and we knew it was going to be a long scene of her walking through those aisles, you know, of picking out the toy, and we planted that science kit at that aisle, and you know, we gave her a path and stuff. And actually, that clip is a lot longer at the top, but we were all sweating because the film was running through the camera like this. And we're like, oh no, she's not gonna get there in time. But we also did not know, I mean, I had no idea she was gonna take such a meticulous care in looking at every single toy along the way. And because I told her the task, okay, look at the toy boxes, you know, and then get to the science kit. So, but I thought she would be like any other kid, like my daughter, who would just run through the toy store and get to the prize. But she was not that person. She was, so it was great because Paul also at the same time was like, oh, okay. You know, and then we were all behind the camera going, oh, okay. How many more feet? How many more feet? So I just love that moment.
And that film also had Jenna Malone in it, which is interesting because you worked with her in the next film. And you were working with Paul, who had worked on the character this time and was also a producer. Did it feel like the way that you were collaborating with the actors on this third film, did it start to feel like your process was shifting and changing in response to being 3 films in?
I didn't feel like my process was changing so much as kind of incorporating more elements or different elements, you know, especially because I was working with Shailena, who's young and unexperienced actor. And working with Paul, and I know now far more than I did back then that actors have different ways of working and their process is different. And working with Paul was pretty much like working with a non-actor in a sense that he showed up, he drove the car to set of the character Joby's car, and he would show up dressed as Joby Taylor every morning on set. And he was Joby Taylor until he went back to the motel room. So it was an incredible process for me working with him.
Yeah, right. So, and that film has a very strong and particular ending.
Yeah.
Which, I really want to talk about endings. We're going to start talking about endings because for those of you who have, or when you see So's films, she has a real curiosity and interest in the way that you you end your films, ensuring that it's not over. It's a very distinct feeling that you get at the end of each of your films. It's not like we get let off the hook and it's all resolved and like, great, I feel better for seeing that film and off I go, everything's tied up, life's perfect. You really, there's things that you're interested in around endings, it seems to me, that are about allowing things to linger or stay active. Does that feel like it's, as I think people saw from that very first clip in your first film, In Between Days, is that something that you feel conscious of? Like the words that I'm saying, like, yeah, I kind of know this, or is it something you feel like you're discovering, or And what is that? I'm giving you about 3 questions here, so decide what you want to answer. But what does that say? So you're like, it's very interesting in terms of getting to that point too, in terms of what it says about structure for you.
Yeah, I always kind of think in a way that at the end, I want the audience to feel like you've experienced a slice of a whole pie of this character or these characters within the film, so that like they kind of continue to live on after you leave. So that, you know, for instance, in Joby Taylor's case, at the end he he does something really bad, but so like part of his true nature. You know, his girlfriend comes and shows up, who's Jenna Malone, and then he kind of abandons her in the motel room and hitches a ride with a truck at the end, which is, and then he just leaves, which is kind of like a reflection of his nature of how he ended up not having a relationship with his daughter, you know. So, and then also, you know, kind of a sense of where, you know, sense that he's going someplace, but where can he possibly go, you know. So I kind of want people at the end of the film think about that, like, what are the decisions he's making, how did he end up there, and where can he go, what are his possibilities, so that it's not so easy to be like judgmental one way or the other. I feel like when I write these stories about these characters, I kind of want to understand them better at the end. But at the same time, it should be like an organic process where they can live on after. You know what I mean? Because it shouldn't be the end in a sense of trying to understand that person. It's a continuation of that process.
Yeah, and like you're designing it. It feels like you're designing it structurally so as that we're left with a sense of many questions. Does that, you know, what happens next? Literally being one of the questions.
Yeah. And that can be. I mean, I do understand that can be quite frustrating for an audience because, like, you want an answer in a way, but I do feel like it's far more interesting if you have questions afterwards, and it's like reflection on yourself or somebody you know, and also trying to, I don't know, find some sort of meaning.
Yeah, no, I think that's right. I think that's what's so clever about them is that you're left wrestling, you know? Yeah. It's very active for the viewer. Segueing towards the next clip, were the endings for all of the films before Love Song scripted as being what they were by the time you had completed cutting the film? Did the endings, were they as scripted?
Yes. In Between Days, Treeless, and for Ellen were scripted endings exactly. I mean, I shot it exactly as was scripted. For Ellen's ending is like an homage to 5 Easy Pieces, so it was very clear. I actually had that ending in the beginning, like when I first writing the story, that I'm gonna end there, you know, so I knew where the story was gonna go, and figured, you know, and it was just a matter of how to nuance his journey to get there. Yeah. So, and then I have to say the only film that I didn't have a concrete ending was for Love Song. And my partner and I, we wrote 2 different endings, and then we shot both endings for the film. Yeah. You don't believe me.
No, I do believe you. I just think it's so great. I mean, it's so great because it's so not totally, you know, controlled, you know. But do you know why? Oh,
why?
Do you know why you didn't? You know,
why I didn't have a concrete ending for Ellen?
Yeah.
Because my husband and I were arguing, and he was saying, he was like, you're a pessimist. You have negative view on human nature, and you're a downer about love stories. And I would say you're romantic. You have one-sided view about love. It's not always a happy ending. So then we agreed to write both and shoot both. Yeah.
And now we'll play the clip.
Yeah.
So you can see who won. Let's see who won.
We screwed up.
I should have paused it. I don't know if you were all there yesterday for Love Song, like part one. Part one was two friends who go on this road trip. They have this romantic moment, and then they split up. They don't talk to each other for 3 years. And then Mindy, who's played by Jenna Malone, invites Sarah, who's played by Riley Q, to come to her wedding. And Mindy's getting married. And now they have another encounter during bachelorette party. They hire a stripper, they go to a nightclub, they go dancing, and then they have another romantic encounter. And then this is the morning of the wedding day. And then Mindy's having doubts and she wants to go for a walk, so.
So you won. Didn't you?
What?
Did you win? That was you winning, wasn't it?
Yeah. Okay, to be fair, so we did a first cut with a happy ending, as in like Mindy and Sarah stayed together. And then we showed it to, and I said, fine, let's see if it works. And then we showed it to our producers and investors, and they're like, that doesn't feel right. I'm like, great. I let them have their first pass, and then they didn't like that. So I put my ending in there, and they're like, that seems right.
So which one did you shoot first on the day? How did you do it process-wise?
Well, I think this goes back to like what you could do with the footage you gather, because on the day of the shoot on the lake, for the final scene there, we ran out of time because I wanted to do all these walking shots of them in the trees and path and with the water and stuff. So I spent loads of time doing that, and I just loved it. And then by the time they got to the rock where they're supposed to have this emotional dialogue between them and declare their love and stuff, we kind of ran out of time. And it was also freezing cold, so they were both shivering and they're saying they love each other, and it just, yeah. So then it didn't work, essentially. So, I mean, we shot everything that day, but when I got to the editing room with the footage, I realized I really wanted them walking a lot. So I'm gonna have to use that footage because I shot a lot of it and then put their, the conversation between them over it as if it's like, they're communicating somehow as they're walking, everything they need to say. And that seemed to work, so it's completely manufactured authenticity of emotions. So that's what I would call it. And thankfully that worked, but that's not something that I designed initially. It was just something I had to work with the material that I had. Yeah.
But did you shoot the sad ending first? Just for a way to describe it, the ending where they didn't get together first, literally the wedding, or was the ending that you shot? Yeah, can you recall what you?
Yeah, we shot the wedding first because a lot of the ensemble cast, some of them had to leave early, so all the walking and then the happy ending that was supposed to happen on the rock and during their walk,
so it
was the last day of the shoot.
Yeah, right.
Yeah.
Yeah, interesting. Yeah. I think it's so. I'd like to move into television at this point because we're immersed in this very much your process, very much stories that are of interest and importance to you, and your style. We're seeing it shift and yet still have similar notes and integrity in it. So, what has it been like for you to? Obviously be able to go and earn money, which is great in TV, but to walk into other people's environments. And I'd love to start by asking you about Transparent.
Yeah.
Because there's been a bit written about the process of Transparent, and there's an exercise that I understand I know a little bit about, and I'd love to know if this was part of the process for you, called the box, which I've read about. Do you want to just talk about stepping into that world and what it's like leaving your own, being the leader of your own set?
I shadowed a friend of mine, Stacey Passon, who's also an independent filmmaker. She was directing an episode of Transparent before me, so I shadowed her set. So I kind of got an intro of how shooting an episode might be. One of the things that, like for me, reflecting back on that experience, I loved it. So I thought, oh, this is how TV is going to be. It's going to be like this jam session where the writer and the director and then, the creator of the show and then DP, we all get together if the scene's not working and you solve it right there. And it's not just on you to fix this problem, but, you have like a great group of collaborators. And that's what it felt like working on Transparent. But as I found out later, it's not at all also Transparent. Was very much the exception of the work process on TV directing. So the box is basically every morning at call time, everyone gets together in a circle. That's like everyone in the crew and also cast member, and you kind of share things that are going on in your life briefly. You step on the box, and some people, if they feel like singing, they would sing, or they'll talk about how much they miss their baby boy who was born a month ago. Or it was very like personal and intimate, and everyone was kind of part of this family. And I think that really carried into the process of working, and everyone really enjoyed being there together, So that was really amazing.
And you did say to me that that somehow that Jill Soloway has managed to create an environment where the ownership feels shared.
Yes, and I think that's the main thing about TV in a way. I think, in Transparent, you feel like the ownership is shared, in the responsibility of like making a perfect episode or delivering a great, visually stunning and perfectly acted episode does not weigh on you alone, nor on the writer per se, So that was kind of really wonderful. I think what happens to some independent directors who go into TV directing is thinking that I'm the director coming onto the set and I'm gonna make decisions and I have ownership, and it's completely not the case. You kind of have to leave that all behind as you enter. You just don't know going from show to show what kind of environment you might walk into. So I think it's very important that, for me, I've learned this along the process, and it's only been a little over a year for me directing on TV shows.
So you've done maybe 4 or 5 shows now, haven't you? Episodes on?
I think I've done 7 or 8.
Yeah, right. Okay.
So far.
Yeah, wow.
Yeah.
Well, that's a lot in a year.
Yeah. So I think, for me, like the biggest, I try to, with my, agents, to pick the shows that are interesting, so that's helpful. And then also find the shows that are more like Transparent, as in like people who are there love being there, right? So, or they're really dedicated to the show. So everyone has the same goal of delivering the best episode along with you. So it's pretty much very like collaborative effort, and you go there to do your best.
Have there been any basic craft things that have been either really daunting or really liberating about setting into, because presumably some of those environments are a bit more moneyed than making an independent project.
Yes.
So have you had to freak out or upskill, or has there been anything there that...
Yeah, I think time, I think one thing that carries over really well from independent filmmaking into TV episodic directing is that, you learn how to manage your time really well as an independent filmmaker, and how to stretch your money to last, and how to put that on the screen for your own film. So coming into TV directing, you're like really under a lot of pressure to make your days and make sure you cover certain pages of a script. And it really helped me also that I know how to edit my own material. So a lot of times I going on to show, I know what I need to cover and get to edit and finish a scene. So I kind of pre-edit everything, and I do a lot of storyboards before going into the shoot.
Yeah, right. And so what have you got an example of, say, an opposite environment to transparent that you stepped into in terms of television? Something that was maybe a lot more structured, where someone really did own the show. You don't have to name the show if you don't want to.
Yeah. But I think that one of the most opposite show I've done is a law procedural show for a network. It's like they have 3 cameras and they just kind of hose down the courtroom. It's really, I think, because there's so many law shows on TV, they have very systematic way of shooting it and how to represent, everything. So it was it was eye-opening to me in a sense that this is completely the opposite of how I would ever work in my life on a film. So it was good to learn, but I wouldn't want to do it again.
Were you able to create flow inside something that was that structured or rigid?
Yeah. I think it's about, it's, whether for me, I was teaching for 4 years, and then I decided to go into TV directing, just, because I felt like it was something I wanted to try. And then also it offered opportunities for me to keep directing in between my films, as well as, being financially stable. So it offered all these things. So I think going into TV episodic directing, I felt like this is an opportunity for me to try different things. For instance, I just did a horror show, and I learned a tremendous amount about my weaknesses as well as my strengths from doing that show. And it was something that I would have never done, on my own. I would not be sitting down and writing a script for a horror film per se. So things like that has been very good. I think trying to find your own flow, I think it's probably exercising a very specific part of my brain that's directed at being a director. Anyway, it's very targeted muscle that I'm exercising within the TV episodic directing, right? So I try to expand that as much as I can.
So when you say you've had a light shone on what your strengths and your weaknesses were by, say, that last one, where does that, given that we started in a way by talking about the space between your projects, how is this foray, which is quite dynamic, into going into all these other environments, and presumably you're learning a lot about yourself and other ways of working, how does that start to propel your curiosity back towards your next project that's yours? Does it have an impact on it in some way?
Yeah, I think so. I think now, I'm writing my next script, and I feel like certain elements are really not as daunting as it used to be before, Yeah, so I feel like I'm adding to the options that I might have to certain scenes, or how I might design that scene, or how I might envision certain aspects of my own scenes within the story that I want to do. So I think it kind of adds to like my goodie bag that I could pull up, so I think that's interesting.
Yeah, it's great, really, isn't it? Okay, well, let's throw open to the people out here in terms of questions and see what we've got. Great.
I have a question more so just on a personal note. It sounds like you work with your partner quite intimately. Can you talk a bit about that and your experience with him being your partner literally in life and in work?
Do you want the truth?
Authenticity and preaching.
Or,
Totally, two paths.
or manufactured authenticity.
Yeah.
So there are pros and cons, and we've been together for like over 20 years, my husband and I. So we know. I mean, we've been working together for quite a long time. So what we do is we have this rule that there's only one bus driver on the bus. So that is whoever is the writer director of the film that we're working on. So the other person is like map reader or GPS guide or whatever, or the coffee fetcher. I don't know. So the other person works as a support, like a producing support person. So we've done that, and that's been quite useful and successful, because what we do sometimes is also we're both editors, so we'll swap projects and we'll edit on each other's films. So we do that, and for me, when I'm writing, if I feel like I'm too drained to continue writing, I will bring him on to help me finish writing. So, and that's been tremendous for me, because he knows how the story developed originally, and we were constantly in discussion about his film and my film and story ideas. So it's pretty handy, and we always cover each other on sets. So if I'm moving on from one scene to the next, he would be the person, if there's something missing, he'll come up and say, hey, make sure you get the shot of hands, because you might need that to edit. Especially if I'm setting up a single take shot. Single take shot. Yeah, okay. So then he's like, you might want a safety. So, and I do the same for him, So it's been great. But we fight a lot. And then usually when we're co-writing or co-editing something and we don't agree on something, the person who's most passionate about their view wins. So it gets a little loud. Yeah. In the back up there.
Follow up, did you get together with your husband first? Or did you work with him first and then...
Everyone does.
Yeah.
It's all about Brad now.
Yeah. We met in Chicago, and he was studying sculpture, and I was studying painting and performance art. Yeah. So we met long before we started to make films. Yeah. There's someone way up the back here.
Could you give some examples of, with on transparent, talk about the shared ownership? Can you give some examples of how that works on the day, or when you enter into the process of working
On TV? I'm sorry.
She's asking for some specific examples of when you're working on transparent, how the notion of shared ownership actually plays out practically, if you're trying to solve problems or...
Yeah, a lot of times, on transparent, the writer, Bridget, was on set, and a lot of TV shows have the writer come on set when you're shooting. So when a certain scene was not blocking properly, or if the scene was not working because the dialogue was off, then we would have actors and myself and Bridget all get together and talk about why it wasn't working, and we'll shift it and change the line there and then shoot again, So.
Yes, yeah.
I noticed that, the two examples of In Between Days and the shots you use, very kind of have the sense of intimacy and the amount of close-ups you have. So in terms of the cinematography, how far back do you think about those kind of decisions? Is it before the DOP comes on? Do you pitch those kind of ideas, or is it sort of a collaborative process with them to get that kind of that sense?
Did people hear that question?
About close-ups?
There was a question about how early in the process So thinks about you're shooting, how do you say it? Mise en scène.
Yeah. In between days working with Sarah, I told her basically, I want just all close-ups. It was my first film. I had no idea what I was doing. So I told her, I want just really close. I want to see her skin pores and stuff. And she was like, whoa, that's not good. So she pulled back just a little bit. I'm like, oh, no. So I wanted to get closer. She wanted to pull back. We compromised on In Between Days. But I just love close-ups, I think now that I'm a little older, maybe I like it a little less, but I just love like being in their face. And Treeless, working with Anne, we kind of talked about like in general what kind of feel we wanted, you know, and I've worked with her before. She shot my husband's first feature. And so I knew how she worked, and she kind of knew how I wanted to work. So we had it was like, it was seamless working with her. You know, she showed up in Korea, I think, a week before we started shooting. And then we went, you know, we were prepping, and then we just started to shoot, and it was just kind of flowing with her. And then with Reed for Ellen, we sat down and went through each scene and talked about how we were going to frame on for Ellen. And yeah, and then Love Song, I had 2 DPs. With Kat, I had some references that I showed her. And then with Guy, who shot the second, same thing. I wanted part 2 of Love Song to look quite different than part 1. So I switched to a different DP to do very different, like kind of slightly different, to give you this feeling that it's not, it's the same film, but not quite the same people, you know? So
That's interesting. Yes, down the front here.
I just had a question just regarding your filmography and all your TV work that you've done so far. Do you ever feel stylistically that you have to be cohesive in going from film to film, or from all your TV work? Do you feel like you have to be, you know, you kind of have to stand out with each different work, or do you feel like you have to make it cohesive in some way?
I'm just going to share that question
Sure.
with the room. The question is just about whether So feels she has to be cohesive with her visual style going from film to film, or moving between television and film.
No, not necessarily. I think right now, I feel like I want to do something different, but the same. If that makes sense. I don't know. I don't think about that kind of like, oh, should it be cohesive per se, but I do want to get a sense that I am trying something new as a filmmaker, you know, either within the story itself or in challenging myself to do something different. I don't know if that means I have to write the story myself, or if I'm adapting a book, or if a good script comes to me, then I'll take that on. But I think it just depends on what I'm drawn to as a person at that time. You know, so as far as TV work comes to me, I try to do TV work that I kind of find interesting, in a sense that it's going to give me a different experience than what I've had before. So that's kind of been the decision-making process for me. So.
Yes.
Could you just talk a little bit about the challenges working with like non-actors and in between days versus people like Jenna and Paul, and like how your directing might shift, or what the I guess how your directing changes when you're working with non-actors versus for like quite experienced people.
Did the room hear that? Yep, great. Okay.
Yeah. I don't, in my film work, when I'm working with non-actors and actors, I don't recall that being a big change for me. You know what I mean? I treat like non-actors in the same way as I would actors in a way. So maybe my directing style is not very good, but I need to get better or something. But you know, the thing that is interesting about TV directing is that there's so many, I've done 7 or 8 TV shows, and there's so many actors in each one of those shows. So I kind of have to learn how to be a better director working with actors, actually. So I have to say, in that sense, I'm getting loads of experience, you know, because each one on each of those shows have actors who come from different methods or different processes. So I have to figure that out, and I have to learn how to speak with them and communicate. So I think that's been a great experience in a way. So, yeah.
Yes, over there. You, Adi.
What's it like, sort of adding to that question, if you're coming into like a season 3 or 4 of a TV show, so it's really established, and the actors essentially know the show better than you might, not you, but the director might, how's that negotiating that with the actors?
Okay, so if I go into 3rd or 4th season of a group, yes.
Coming in to direct 1 or 2 acts.
I think when you go on a show and it's like a 3rd or 4th season of a show such as Transparent or Halt and Catch Fire or whatever show that you get invited into, I think it's just basic, I think, manners. You go in as a guest. You're a guest in their home, really. So you don't go in there thinking that I'm going to redecorate your house. You go in there and you try to be a very polite, kind of guiding force or a collaborator. So I think it's just a matter of that. I don't know, it's just a process, but it's also, if you have respect for their work, then they'll have respect for your work. So it's just kind of building mutual respect and trust in a way. Yeah, if that makes sense.
Yes.
Thanks. Dr. You seem very calm, and you seem obviously highly capable. Like, you're doing so much. You're doing TV, your own films. It sounds like some of your own films, you're working on the fly, you're working with your partner, you've got a child. How do you manage it all?
Oh, how do I manage it all? I don't really.
What helps you hold it together and helps you keep going, helps you producing such a high level of work?
Oh, I don't know. Thank you for saying that. I don't really think I do a high amount of work. I think the key in my life is that I have a really great partner. So I think I have to give loads of credit to him because he's holding down the fort with our 2 daughters while I'm here. So, and then also, when he is down on his work, I try to be the supporting force behind him. And when I'm down about my work, he tries to be the supporting force behind me. So I got really lucky in finding someone early in my life who could be, the support system for one another. But if you're not as fortunate as that, I recommend that you find somebody who's a friend or sister or brother who could do that for you. And I feel like that's really key to finding your tribe or partner to give you support for long-term support, So I think that's probably how I do it.
And on that note, we have to finish our session.
This session is presented by Images and Sound. The Big Screen Symposium is brought to you by Script to Screen and J&A Productions. We would like to thank our event partners, the New Zealand Film Commission, New Zealand On Air, Images and Sound, Auckland Tourism Events and Economic Development, and Stage and Screen Travel Services. Voiceover is provided by Samantha Dukes and music by Poddington Bear.